Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the January meeting of the Democratic Services Committee, and hope you've all had a nice Christmas, pleasant New Year celebrations, and ready to embark on a new season of things to do with the Council. Disappearing around me. Right, we'll proceed to the agenda then, and the first item on the agenda is the declaration of interest. Does anybody have an interest to declare? Right, no interest to declare, right. The second item is to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting, and they've been circulated, and is it your wish that these meetings are a true and accurate record of the meeting held back in April last year, was it? I haven't got the agenda in front of me.
Happy to propose, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Anybody else? Right, we've had a few seconders here. Councillor Strong and Councillor McConnell. And everybody in agreement? Nodding away. Excellent. Good. Let's move on to item 3 then, which is the item relating to proposed constitution amendments. So we'll pass over to our monitoring officer, James Williams.
Okay.
Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report, members, is for the committee to consider a number of proposed changes to the Council's constitution. So I've conducted a full review of the constitution for the purposes of strengthening our governance arrangements at Monmouthshire. And I've made a number of proposed amendments I'd like members to consider today and perhaps provide some feedback on. So in your document pack, you'll have a copy of the constitution with proposed amendments and track changes. So all the changes there, the deletions, the additions, and where I've moved paragraphs around, will be highlighted in track changes, so hopefully they're easily identifiable. You'll also have a copy of my report, which deals with the more significant changes, which I'll go through in detail shortly. And you also have a schedule, an appendix 2. So this is a schedule of changes that include some minor changes, but which I felt nevertheless needed some further explanation for members to understand why they're being made. So you've got the report, the schedule, and the master document itself with track changes showing markup of all the amendments I've made to the Constitution for you to consider today. So what I propose to do is to take members through the report in detail, perhaps take some feedback and comments that members have. That feedback will then be used as part of the consultation process with group leaders and SLT to make final amendments to the proposed constitution before it goes to Council for approval in due course. So are there any questions on the process before I move into the body of the report itself?
Yeah. Happy with that, James? Are you happy to take questions as and when they arise or at the end?
Whichever you prefer, Chair. I'm happy to do whatever.
happy for questions as they arise because they're probably more relevant at that stage, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first thing I'd like to direct members to is the changes to the meeting procedure rules. So that's at paragraph 4.2 of the report. So the Constitution at the moment has meeting procedure rules at paragraph 27. Paragraph 27 of the Constitution. But at the moment, this reads that the Council procedure rules will apply to meetings of full Council and, where applicable, to other meetings conducted within the Council. But it doesn't say at the moment who determines whether or not a rule is applicable. So it leads to a situation where the chair or perhaps the person clerk in the meeting has to try and work out which rule applies to which meeting by cross-referencing the CPR with other standing orders within the Constitution at the moment. So in my view, that is needlessly complicated and it could lead to governance failures potentially and ultra-virus decisions. So what I'm proposing we do is analogous to what other councils do, is have separate meeting procedure rules, one for council, one general set of committee meeting procedure rules, and proper cabinet meeting procedure rules. So I've drafted these and they're in the draft constitution there. Council meeting procedure rules I propose would remain at paragraph 27, and I'll talk to the changes I've made to those separately. This is just about separating the rules out at the moment. Committee meeting procedure rules, those are paragraph 30 of the revised constitution, and these would apply to committees which haven't adopted their own specific meeting procedure rules. And then also refreshed Cabinet meeting procedure rules to make sure they're compliant with the Local Government Act and have everything there you would expect for a public meeting to have. And those are paragraph 31 of the revised Constitution. Are there any questions on the proposal to separate out those meeting procedure rules before I move on to the next item? No? Okay. So the next item is members' eligibility to vote. Now, there appears to be some confusion from members about when members can and can't vote. Particularly, I've been involved at council meetings, for example, when a member's come back from a comfort break late or has taken a phone call or answered the front door if they're attending remotely, and then I get inundated with messages saying that that member shouldn't be voting or asking if that member should vote. Now, at the moment, there's nothing in the Constitution that prevents a member from voting if they've missed a section of the debate, and there's nothing in the law that prevents a member from doing that. The only requirement under the Local Government Act is that they're present when voting, so either remotely or in person, they must be present when they vote. However, there is a risk of legal challenge if a member votes on something when they've missed material information. So if they take a decision without the proper facts, that decision could be challenged in judicial review, so for unreasonableness or something along that line. So JR proceedings, essentially. That's particularly important as well when we're talking about quasi-judicial committees, so committees like licensing, planning. If a member misses that, then obviously there are much wider financial and legal consequences to the council for making that decision. So what I'm proposing is that the standing orders relating to the various meetings include a provision that members should be present for both the introduction and the entirety of the debate. And the chair can exclude the member from voting if they aren't there for the entirety of it, but also discretion to allow the member to vote if they haven't missed material information. So, for example, if a member is slightly late coming back from a comfort break, they haven't missed material information, or if they take a phone call, they answer the front door. It just allows a little bit of common sense to be exercised by the chair of the meeting to allow that member to vote, because that isn't against the law. It is a matter for standing orders to regulate. In my view, that would be the more sensible way to proceed, albeit in relation to quasi-judicial committees, the draft proposals would envisage that there's no such discretion, so a member must be present for the entirety of the introduction and also the debate, because basically to reflect the heightened legal and financial consequences to the council if they were to make a decision that could subsequently be challenged. So any questions? Yeah.
Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wondered which paragraph is the change that you've just mentioned?
Of course, yeah. So the council meeting procedure rules that is at 27.10.4, and I'll just read that out actually because I think it would be useful for me to do so. So it's the new paragraph 27.10.4. Members should be present either in person or remotely for the entirety of the introduction and debate on an item of business in order to vote. Those who attend the meeting remotely must have their cameras on and be visible on screen in order to be recorded present at the meeting. If a member is not present for the whole of the introduction or debate on an item of business, they may be excluded from the vote on that item of business if, in the opinion of the chair, the member missed information that was part of the debate, information or part of the debate that was material to the decision before council. There's similar provisions in the committee meeting procedure rules, paragraph 30.11.4, and in the cabinet meeting procedure rules at 31.8.8. And the issue I raised in relation to quasi-judicial committees, that's in paragraph 30.11.6. I'll just read that out. So members attending committees which are exercising quasi-judicial function must be present for the entirety of the introduction of the item and debate in order to vote.
Yeah, I think sorry, I think the question I got is that I do recall at when hybrid meetings were originally brought in Wales, there were some regulations to allow members to actually continue if there was some internet problems.
Yes, so that's already in our standing orders. So
so is that included or not? Because obviously, somebody could be basically present there and hear all the debate, but the camera off because of a very poor connection or something like that.
Yes, exactly. So paragraph 27.10.5, the failure of any technological provision where that leads to a partial or complete loss of contact between the remote attendees and for those members in actual attendance to the meeting shall not invalidate any part of the deliberations or vote taken. The Chair may postpone the meeting if they deem appropriate. So what you would expect is for a brief technological issue, if the camera wasn't working, or you're talking for a few seconds, that wouldn't invalidate any proceedings. So that, you're right, that comes from the 2021 Act, or the regulations that came from the 21 Act.
Thanks, yeah, I thought there was something on that, thank you.
What you would expect then is for the Chair, if that was to be a prolonged issue, you'd expect the Chair to adjourn the meeting until that member could be brought back in, because otherwise you could end up making a decision that could be challenged potentially if the member then voted on that decision. So what that provision was for is to make sure members aren't automatically excluded, even under standing orders. So our standing orders at the moment don't regulate it at all. What I'm proposing we do is have some regulation to it, where a member is expected to attend for the introduction and the debate, albeit the Chair has a discretion to use common sense, basically, and allow them to vote where they haven't missed anything important.
So does the Constitution include this internet problem, or is it in the standing orders?
It's in the standing order, so the section I just read out there, so paragraph 27.10.4, that was already in there. It's not something I've added.
Okay, thank you.
It already exists.
Thank you. Councillor Strong?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just so that I'm clear and everybody else is clear, it seems to boil down to 4.33 is saying they may, we've got the word may in there. 4.34, the quasi-judicial ones, is a question of must.
Yes,
and you've just clarified that. I just wonder, for sake of clarity, and if on 4.33, well, the Chair may allow them to vote, would it be worth putting in the Chair may, at their discretion, allow them to vote, just so that we're absolutely sure of the difference between the two situations, or is that in there already?
It's in
somewhere?
already, is it? So
it's already in there,
yes,
is it?
yes. So
Okay.
the Chair, if they feel that they've missed material information, then they won't be allowed to vote, but the Chair can allow them to vote.
Yeah, because I'm not sure. Sorry.
No, it's fine. No, yeah.
I'm not sure all members were clear about that at our one of our recent meetings. So there was some confusion.
Well, this is it. It didn't exist before.
Yeah.
So our Constitution was silent on it. So I want to make it clear that rather than using the general powers that the Chair has to facilitate the meeting, I want
I'm very happy with that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strong. Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd. Thanks, Chair. I chair licensing. I've always gone very much to the rule that if, for whatever reason, technological, having to leave the dog out or whatever, then obviously if that person misses any part of it, then they can't vote. And I have faced a little bit of criticism about that. But, I do feel that as we've gone on now with hybrid meetings, it is becoming almost slightly farcical when people are saying, well, I've got to leave the dog out, or, the post is there, or whatever. I think it's just very bad PR in the full council when people are having these breaks. I joined in 2017, and obviously there were no hybrid meetings, and obviously other people here, like the chair and so on, and chairs of the county council were very strong then. If you went out for a comfort break and you missed a part of the debate, then you were not allowed to vote. So, I do think we need to make members very much aware about this rule of popping out for whatever, other than technological issues. It does become quite disjointed, and obviously decisions in full council could be challenged. You're making very important decisions like the replacement local development plan and so on. And I do think at times some meetings have become a little bit disjointed and unclear, because it goes down to the chair's discretion as to whether they allow somebody to vote. So I do have some trepidation about that. Thanks. Diolch.
Okay, diolch. Anybody else? So can we proceed then, James? Thank you.
Sorry, can I come back?
Yes, certainly. Councillor Strong?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think we have many occasions when councillors are leaving the meeting. Those are in the chamber anyway. Not many occasions when they're leaving the meeting. We have instituted a series of breaks, which I think is very sensible, every sort of 90 minutes or so. But I think if we enforce that in a way that anybody who goes out for a comfort break can't vote, I mean, you could easily run into trouble with the Equality Act there, in terms of if somebody's got a particular illness, or even a question of age. Some of us know to our cost, but that could become an issue. So I think allowing the chair to show some discretion is a very sensible thing there. If a chair felt that it was being abused, then that would be another matter. I think what chairs need to do and are doing by and large is if we have a 15-minute break, it should be 15 minutes and not 20. And if people are late back for that, then, you know, it would be legitimate to say, well, you can't vote because, you know, through your own fault. But I think we have to be careful. After all, members of Parliament can vote to send the country to war without it being in the debate at all. So, you know, we shouldn't go over the top on these issues.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, Chair, I've drafted it in such a way that it's an expectation that members would be in attendance for the introduction and the entirety of the debate, because if a member leaves at any point, they don't know if they might miss. I'm probably too far from the mic, probably. So, you know, I drafted it in such a way that members are expected to attend the introduction and the entirety of the debate. But obviously a member may need to leave for reasons beyond their control temporarily, and they won't know if they've missed material information. So it's not a question necessarily of it being abused, but it allows the chair the discretion to exercise common sense where they might have missed nothing relevant at all, and there should be nothing in law preventing them from voting, in which case the chair may feel that they should be allowed to vote.
Yeah, I've just actually found the paragraph. The only thing that concerns me about 2710.4 is that it says, if in the opinion of the chair that member missed information or part of the debate that was material to the decision before council, I think it would be helpful if it was a joint decision with the monitoring officer as well, because what I'm concerned about is in situations where, for example, there's a very close vote of, say, 21 to 20, and you know, it can make a difference, that particular decision. So I think to ensure that things are kept on an apolitical basis, I think that you know, you should actually have that being a joint decision when it is a very close vote.
Of course, I'm shuffling my papers because I'm trying to find the relevant section of the Council Procedure Rules, which already state essentially that the Chair has the power to interpret the Constitution in consultation with the monitoring officer. So if I felt the Chair was doing something that was unlawful or could bring the Council subject to legal challenge, they would do so. The Chair obviously has to act impartially as well, so part of my role as monitoring officer is to make sure that they do so. So I think that's already covered by the existing provisions of the Constitution, and unfortunately, I don't have them to hand, but there is a provision within the Constitution which, in the Council Procedure Rules, which says that the Chair interprets the Council Procedure Rules in consultation with the monitoring officer, so not on their own, they have to take legal advice. Yeah, so
I'm just wondering whether it, in that paragraph it should say, and the Chair should act in an impartial manner, and then if any concern is raised, the monitoring officer acts jointly with them. Thank you.
So 27.8.1, the person presiding at the meeting may exercise any power or duty of the Chair following consultation with the monitoring officer. The decision of the Chair of the meeting on all points of procedure and order, and the Chair's interpretation of any procedure rules shall be final, and no debate may ensue thereon. So it's already in the Constitution that they need to consult with the monitoring officer, and it's implicit that they have to act impartially because that's their role if they don't be in breach of that. So I think if you had to put in every single procedure rule the Chair has to act impartially, I mean, that's the logical kind of implication of what you're suggesting. I think they have to act impartially in interpreting all the rules.
Would it be worthwhile adding to that, and reference must be made to the paragraph that you've previously quoted where...
I personally don't think so. But
you don't think so?
The reason I don't is because it says in relation to all procedure rules that the Chair has to consult with the monitoring officer. I mean, it would make that bit redundant if you then apply that to every single procedure rule within the Council Procedure Rules, because you'd have to say every single time the monitoring officer, the Chair has to consult with the monitoring officer. And if, for example, you didn't do any, does that mean then they need to? Whereas if you've got an overarching paragraph which says they have to in relation to all procedure rules, then that covers it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, did you want to come back?
Yeah, just very briefly, because a few people have come back. You know, the one thing I would say is I think it's less clear-cut for people who are coming in online, coming in on Teams, as opposed to being in the actual chamber. because the chair is very much aware, and I know they're aware by looking at the screen, but it's quite difficult chairing a hybrid meeting, because you've got people in the chambers you have now, and then people online, and then if people online dip out, I just think it's slightly more of an issue for people who are coming in on Teams, and I think it's something, you know, we need to keep an eye on. Thanks. Diolch.
Thank you. Councillor McConnell, did you want to? No, okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, James. On to the next one then.
Thank you. So the next item I'd like to discuss is the council's call-in procedures. So the council's call-in procedures are a new paragraph 32.14. So this essentially deals with calling of decisions of cabinet. However, at the moment, there's no established process in place for calling in executive functions exercised by senior officers. So the chief executive and SLT under delegation from cabinet or under the Constitution. So what I'm proposing is that certain decisions or certain classes of decisions taken by the Chief Executive or members of SLT are also subject to the same democratic oversight and scrutiny as decisions of Cabinet are, and be subject to call-in. So that would involve amending the scheme of delegations, paragraph 24, to classify officer decisions either as key decisions or operational decisions. And this is the model that other local authorities use. So what I'm proposing is that key decisions by officers are subject to the same call-in requirements as cabinet decisions. So they would need to be posted on the website, emailed to all members, and they couldn't be implemented until the period for call-in has expired. So the wording I'm using for key decisions is paragraph 24.2.3. I'll just read that out. A key decision means a decision which involves the exercise of an executive function by a chief officer, which is likely to A, result in the council incurring expenditure or making savings which are significant, or B, be significant in terms of its effects on the well-being of individuals living or working in the council's area. So as I say, it would involve changing the scheme of delegation so that officer decisions classed as key decisions would be subject to call-in. If that decision is made, it would be posted to the website, emailed to all members, and then it could not be implemented until the period for call-in has expired. Okay? Any questions on that part? No. Okay, the second change... Sorry.
Sorry, just quickly, there will need then to be some procedure for ensuring that members are informed which decisions are key and which aren't. I know we already get notified of individual cabinet decisions, but we need something similar with key decisions flagged up separately from others, yeah?
Exactly. So what I propose we do is follow the same model as cabinet decisions and ICMD decisions. So you would be emailed with a copy of the decision, the details of the decision, and when it would be implemented. And it would be 2 working days before it could be implemented, so members could call into scrutiny committee if they wanted to. So the second change to the call-in procedure rules relates to the monitoring officer's veto. Now, the word veto seems inappropriate to be in this context because officers shouldn't really be vetoing anything. It's more a matter of applying the rules to make sure the council acts lawfully. And it says that the monitoring officer can veto call-in requests which are outside the scheme. There isn't a scheme as such. There's no real kind of rules on call-in at the moment other than the urgency provisions. So what I'm proposing is that the I've deleted the word veto because I said I think that's inappropriate, but also inserted specific circumstances within the call-in rules where certain decisions shouldn't be subject to call-in. So those are paragraph 32.14.11. So I'll just read that out. The call-in procedure shall not apply to A, matters that are substantially similar to those matters that are substantially similar to those that have already been considered by a scrutiny committee prior to the decision being made or have been the subject of a previous call-in within the last 6 months, unless there's been a material change of circumstances. So if something's already gone to scrutiny, either as part of the forward work plan or because it's been called in, then unless something has changed, they shouldn't be subject to calling again. Otherwise, you get a kind of never-ending circular process, and scrutiny could potentially be abused and politicised. So the purpose is to protect the integrity of scrutiny as a scrutinising process. Not that it's never happened here, as far as I'm aware. I've never seen it happen, but at the moment the Constitution is drafted in such a way that it could be abused. So it's to limit scrutiny where there's already been scrutiny of that decision, unless there's been a material change of circumstances. Because if a decision has been made and then the surrounding circumstances around that decision have changed, for example, financial implications or anything really that's material, then it should be subject to scrutiny, and members should be allowed to call it in those circumstances. B, urgent decision. So that isn't an addition, that's already in the Constitution, but I thought it's sensible to include it within this paragraph for completeness. And then C, operational decisions by officers. So that's just to reflect the changes I've made to ensure that certain decisions by officers have visibility and democratic accountability, whereas innocuous things like if I order a box of pencils for the legal department, obviously that wouldn't be subject to calling, because that wouldn't be a significant decision that members would ordinarily be concerned with. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, so the next item, paragraph 4.3, is the attendance of group leaders at Cabinet. So under our current rules, members can only participate in meetings where they're not a member at the discretion of the chair. So that currently sits at 5.4.2 of the Constitution. So whilst members can observe those meetings, they can't attend and speak at them unless the chair permits it. However, there's a long-standing convention at Monmouthshire that group leaders can attend Cabinet and ask questions in relation to items on the agenda. But at the moment, there's no formal procedures in place for that, so it doesn't say when questions should be submitted, how many can be submitted, what happens if the group leader isn't available, can they substitute. There's nothing there at the moment, it's purely convention, and I've had some issues over the last 12 months where queries being raised about what actually are the rules where there aren't any. So what I'm proposing we do is amend our Constitution to codify, number one, the fact that members can attend as of right, and also the procedures that should be in place to allow that. So the proposals are at paragraph 31.4.3 of the revised Constitution. Paragraph 31.4.3, so essentially this will give group leaders the right to attend Cabinet meetings without the discretion. They have that as of right. They can ask up to 2 questions in relation to each item on the agenda. Those questions to be submitted 5 p.m. one clear day before the Cabinet meeting, and they have the ability to substitute a member if they're unable to attend. Any questions on that? Councillor Brown?
Councillor Brown?
Yes, I just wondered if the questions had been limited to 2 by convention for each item, or if it was just a question of, may ask questions in relation to each agenda item. I just wondered if I mean, obviously, if it's a very important item, and particularly on budget issues where there's pages and pages, I just wondered if it would be better to actually just cross out just say that in 31.4.4 the group leader may ask questions, because obviously they've got to be in before then, but I'm just a bit concerned about items of budget which go on for hundreds and hundreds of pages, and if you're restricted to 2 questions, it may miss out very important aspects of the budget.
So I'll feed that back into the consultation process with group leaders to take views. But I've got no issues with that from a legal point of view. I think the number 2 essentially came from the fact that from the Cabinet meetings that I've observed, there's never been any more than 2, and it's usually 1. And I suppose it's a Cabinet meeting, so an executive functions decision meeting, not a scrutiny committee as such. But I totally take your point, there may be items on the Cabinet agenda which may warrant more than 2 questions. So yes, I can certainly feed that back in and get views from all group leaders before taking the final.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor McDonald?
Yeah, I'm just slightly concerned. The idea of limiting it, I take on board the idea of, a huge document might well elicit more than 2 questions, but that distinction between the nature of the meeting So allowing any number of questions, or it might be seen as almost encouraging any number of questions, which turns it into a debating chamber rather than a cabinet meeting. So something like chair's discretion, or we could, by all means, this discussion then goes forward to further discussion. But my concern is that it might change the nature of might take the cabinet meetings off kilter slightly if it becomes a debating chamber rather than a cabinet meeting.
As that's been raised by both members, I would include that as part of my consultation process. I will say that the members of Democratic Services Committee questioned whether this should be limited to 2 or whether there should be a discretion to the chair, just to allow some flexibility. I suppose it could be a big report which requires more questions, or there may be an innocuous report which you wouldn't expect more than 2, and how that's best achieved, I suppose, will be through a matter of consultation.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it just said questions, I mean, if it turned up being a problem, I think that it could be looked at again. I mean, I've actually been a councillor in another authority, and effectively there, the cabinet allowed members, ordinary members, to actually go along to the meetings and ask questions themselves, even not sending them beforehand. And if the cabinet member couldn't answer the question at the meeting, they simply said, we'll send you a written response. So it was, much more, the cabinet meetings were much more open than we've got here. And obviously, there may be a group leader may have a particular favourite question, but their members haven't got any opportunity to ask any questions at all. We're looking at democracy here, unless they do so via their leader.
Yeah. At the moment, there are no rules on the number of questions, so essentially members could ask more, and that hasn't been the case. So it hasn't been my experience that it's been abused. So certainly I could feed that back, that actually putting a limit on it in the Constitution or putting a number on it, perhaps members aren't comfortable with that and they would prefer more discretion to allow as many questions as the report may warrant, I suppose is what you're suggesting, yeah?
Thank you. I must say I personally am fairly comfortable with this limit on asking questions in Cabinet. I think where there are further questions that need asking or that members feel that they would like more information on, we have members' questions at full council, which I feel kind of fulfills that function. And I would agree with Councillor McConnell that we don't really want to turn Cabinet into a second debating chamber when we already kind of have this right to full participation through full council meetings anyway. Yeah, I see your concerns, Councillor Brown, but I do think we probably, need to be clear about the role of Cabinet versus the role of full council and not blur the two together too much.
Okay then, right. Let's move on to the next one. Is it, James? Thank you.
So the next item is the Council's petition scheme. So at the moment, so that's a paragraph 4.6 of my report. So the Council adopted a petition scheme, a statutory petition scheme that was required by the Local Government and Elections Act in 2021. That petition scheme is at paragraph 43 of the Constitution and essentially provides that petitions need to be received as scrutiny first, and then depending on the outcome of scrutiny they can be referred to Cabinet or to officers or to a full meeting of Council for debate. However, when the scheme at 4.3 was adopted, the Council's pre-existing rules on acceptance of petitions within the Council meeting procedure rules, paragraph 27.3, weren't changed, and they contain contradictory procedural rules for petitions. So, for example, the petition scheme at 4.3 of the Constitution permits for a scrutiny committee to refer a petition for debate at full council. However, the pre-existing rules of paragraph 27.30 don't foresee a debate and don't provide for a debate, and consequently don't set out the action the council can take following such a debate. So I propose changes at paragraph 27.30.1, 2 and 3. So the purpose of this is to harmonise the existing statutory petition scheme with the council meeting procedure rules. So if I can ask you to turn to 27.30. So 27.31, that makes it clear that petitions must be received through the statutory petition scheme, so there's not two competing schemes with different rules. Paragraph 27.32 says out how a petition needs to be presented and the time limits involved for presenting a petition. And then paragraph 27.30.3, and that sets out the action the council can take following a debate on a petition, so refer to a cabinet member, committee or an officer, or indeed take no action if that's what they feel is appropriate in those circumstances. So the purpose is to harmonise two contradictory schemes we have at the moment.
Any comments, please? Sorry, any comments, please?
Yeah.
Councillor Strong?
Thank you. Yeah, really important to harmonise it too. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
yeah.
Right. Second question there then is, once it's been referred to the relevant body or individual, what are the rules about what they can do with it? Is it again that they might do something with it, or can they just note it and do nothing about it? Is that how that would stand?
Exactly that, yes. So it depends entirely on the circumstances. It's impossible to draft for every eventuality, but I think the last one we had, it was referred to Councillor Griffiths for him to take action. He said he would take in the council meeting, so it depends entirely on the circumstances.
But there might be some political comeback if they do nothing about it when there's a feeling that they should. Okay, thank you.
Right, any more, James?
Yep. So the next item is the Appointments Committee. So that's a paragraph 4.7 of my report. So the Local Authority Standing Orders Wales Regulations 2006 require that chief officers are appointed either by council or a committee of council. Now the statutory definition of chief officers is much broader than what Monmouthshire uses, so it's more than chief executive and members of SLT. It's actually all members on the JNC pay scale. So we're required by the Localism Act to identify who our chief officers are, and they are subject to the pay policy statement reporting requirements that we report on every year. So it's everybody within the JNC scale. So at the moment, appointments of the chief executive and SLT are made by council, and what I'm proposing is that all appointments of chief officers below SLT are approved by a committee of members, and that will be called the Appointments Committee. It's a committee that is established under regulations made under the Local Government Act, so it needs to be politically balanced and required to have one cabinet member on there. So essentially I'm proposing that the chief executive and SLT members are still appointed by council, but chief officers below the SLT level are appointed by the Appointments Committee, made up of members. Any questions on that? No?
Sorry, there's a note in the chat that some members remotely missed the first question posed by Councillor Strong. Do you need that repeated, Councillor Davis and Councillor Keir? Sorry, Councillor Strong, would you repeat the first question from the previous item?
Yeah, the one was the first question was a question of who the relevant individuals might be, who a petition could be referred to, and James confirmed that could include being referred to officers as well as cabinet members and so on. So that was the first question. And second question, I've forgotten. I should remember it later, but you heard the second question.
I think they only missed the first question.
To it once it's been referred.
Am I right in thinking
to
that?
Person? Yeah.
If you could, yeah, Councillor Keir and Councillor Davis are nodding, so it's good. Thank you.
Okay, so the next item is the amendment to the delegation. So, as members are aware, there have been a number of changes to the SLT structure, with job changes, reallocation of titles and responsibilities. For example, my predecessor was, I think, Chief Officer People and Governance. I'm Chief Officer Law and Governance. There's been a number of those changes as well. So I've made changes to the delegation schemes of paragraphs 24 to 26 to reflect those changes of responsibilities and reallocation of job titles and roles. So they're there to be seen in paragraphs 24 to 26. And then finally, Chair, the last item I have is the Planning Committee has adopted a Planning Code of Practice which prescribes rules for meetings of the Planning Committee. My view is because it prescribes rules for members to follow during Planning Committee, it should form part of the Council's standing orders. So I've included a copy of that at Appendix 3 of the report. It's been approved by the Planning Committee, and my recommendation is that it's incorporated into the Council's Constitution at Part 4. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from members in the chamber or remotely? Okay, thank you very much, James, for that explanation.
Chair, I did
Councillor
ask if I
Buckler?
could ask a question, please. Thank you.
Right, by all means.
James, thank you for your proposed amendments. So your proposed amendments to the Monmouthshire Council's constitution include sort of clearer meeting rules, voting eligibility provisions, officer decision call-in processes, and enhanced group leader participation, which is all good. Whilst these changes address ambiguities, in my view, and improve transparency, concerns may arise that whether the proposals sufficiently curb executive overreach or ensure robust scrutiny. So I'd like you really to sort of consider in the next process of looking at this reworking of the Constitution, how will the amendments practically strengthen transparency and accountability in executive decisions? Secondly, do the proposed voting eligibility rules ensure fair representation without unduly limiting member participation? And are the call-in provisions for officer decisions comprehensive enough to prevent potential misuse of delegated powers? It'd be interesting to have your view. And I do sort of I was doing the general points on the tone of the amendments. So I want them to be considered in the next process. And you may have an initial reaction, James, but I understand there's quite a lot there. But thank you.
In relation to your first point, do you have anything specific you'd like me to take ahead in the consultation process at all?
It's really, it's such an important process that you're doing now, this, re-looking at the Constitution. We have to be extremely careful we're doing it in a very balanced and measured way. And I take, I absolutely take the point that that's what you're aiming for. But I just want to, I suppose, reiterate how important it is. So, whether sort of, it would be decision-making transparency, because I don't think, we necessarily do know as members how these decisions are made.
Which decisions are you referring to, Councillor Buckler?
Well, as in officer decisions along with Cabinet, which is quite interesting, the conversation about Cabinet participation from leaders and questions asked, because I feel that there should be more scrutiny in Cabinet. It's incredibly important. That's the decision-making sort of vehicle for the leadership of the Council. So I don't think we should be curbed. And public participation, I think, is vital. So, are we doing enough for mechanisms of public engagement and feedback? Is it feeling limited or overly complex? Can we simplify things so people residents can communicate much more clearly with the council. And oversight committees, are the scrutiny committee rules and independence, are they lacking clarity? Think of it from the layman, is what I'd say. So I'm just flagging up those concerns.
I think if you've got any specific concerns, it would be useful to you ask, do the scrutiny procedure rules create ambiguity, or do you think any rules in particular need changing? I suppose this is the purpose of this
really,
process, I suppose,
yeah,
for members. Sorry.
I take your point, and I'm not trying to cut in on you at all. What I'm just saying is it's sort of general observations.
Right.
I have got, I have sort of written down some things, and perhaps if I can send you some, it's not the moment to go into it in great depth, I know, but it's just things that have raised in my head as I'm reading the report.
Okay, perhaps if we pick up outside the meeting, I can use that then to feed into the consultation process with group leaders. I'm happy to do that. As you say, maybe appropriate to do that one-on-one. We can have a more detailed conversation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Brown, did you want to come back?
Yes, I was wondering, I mean, in terms of sort of looking at it from the public engagement side, often the petitions are put forward by local residents. And I just wondered, on the point that we've just been looking at, there didn't seem any particular thing in the Constitution to give anybody any feedback, because it's referred to people or individuals or cabinet or committee, but there's no way that somebody who's put in a petition necessarily knows what's happened to it and what's going on in relation to it. And it's sort of that feedback point. I mean, you may get a feedback in terms of when it's debated at council. And fortunately, I think there was a petition that was debated at council, and we got feedback from Councillor Griffiths at the actual meeting, but you don't necessarily get the feedback, sort of formally to the scrutiny committee, or, there needs to be, or the petitioners themselves don't necessarily know what's going on. So I think there does need to be a feedback mechanism on the petition side.
Fine. So I think in terms of standing orders, I don't think that will be included there, because that's to do with how the meeting procedures work. But I think in terms of our petitions guide that we publish online and the guidance we make available to members of the public, we could certainly include in there, couldn't we, John, that we would, at the end of the process for petitions, we could update the petitioner on the outcome and the action that's been taken from the petition. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, because I think my feeling on petitions is often there is this sort of petitions come and they go, and then, for example, if it was a petition to highways officers on some particular aspect, the mechanism isn't set out on how those people get feedback, what's happened subsequently.
Yeah, we can do that. I think, and there's an element of we already do as well. It's just perhaps not member facing. We've still got the two ways the petitions can come in: through full council, through members, or online from individuals themselves. When they come in online, we've already got their contact details and we can go back to them. We tell them what's happening with it and we keep in touch with them through that mechanism, because we haven't got that face-to-face contact. When they come in through members, there's almost that member-led element of it through council, that they've given it to a member to do something with, and then either way, however they come into us, they'll then go back to scrutiny to decide what the next option to do with it is, and the petitioner is always invited along to that. So the petitioner will always have that information from us, whether it's online or in person. The online element is easier because we've got that email contact to send back to them that's done in the background without anyone really noticing.
Yeah, and if these proposals are adopted by council, that will be the only way that petitions can come in. So we will all do it that way then. So it wouldn't be a member, because at the moment, the member petitions is just hand in the petition in, no discussion, no debate. That is contrary to our established and adopted petition scheme under the 2021 Act, which requires a debate at council. So we just have that one process. It'll be much easier then to track who's made the petition and to update them going forward, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Monitoring Officer. Just a couple of questions and comments which might helpfully signpost some further thinking ahead of bringing forward some further amendments for full council's consideration. I just wanted to interrogate the proposed change to paragraph 27.17.2, changes pertaining to the rules of debate to simplify procedures in relation to motions. I just wanted to understand the thinking that lies behind this amendment. My only concern is that the unintended consequence, of course, of what's been proposed here is that it further curtails debate and by extension could conceivably further erode member debate and member the member voice in full council deliberations. I just wonder whether you could walk us through some of the thinking that underpinned or justify this proposed change to 27.17.2. So that's observation number one. I don't know whether you want me to pause at each juncture.
Could I do one at a time?
Respond?
Yeah,
Would that be easier?
I think you probably have a better response for me if you do one at a time, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so 27.17.2. So the purpose of this is it is in response to something that happened at the last council meeting where a member moved a motion. There was then a vote on, so then a member proposed an amendment. There was then a vote on that amendment that was carried, and then a further amendment where the original proposer of the motion was asked if they accepted the amendment. So what you could have in those circumstances is a position where a member proposes a motion, that motion is amended by a vote, and then somebody else can undo that amendment, potentially, by moving a motion that is subsequently agreed by the original mover. So limiting it to the first amendment stops that from happening, and it requires all subsequent amendments to be subject to a vote and not necessarily debate, because members may not have anything to say, may move straight to a vote, for example. But the purpose for this is to where there may be a minor amendment that doesn't require a debate, and the member who proposes the motion is happy with it, then it just negates the requirement for a vote and a debate on it. So this is present in other councils' constitution, and I agree the purpose of it is efficiency, really. So where there is an innocuous amendment that the original proposer is happy with and has no concerns with, why have a debate and vote on it, I suppose, is the rationale. So that's why it's proposed.
No, that's helpful. No, thank you for setting out those reasons, and it's useful to know that this is that this exists in other council constitutions. So speaking of other council constitutions, I've also been doing some reviewing of other comparable constitutions. So I wanted to draw your attention, if I may, to I believe it's paragraph 9.3, which is the election of the leader, and for that matter, section 9.4, the election of the deputy leader, and 9.5, other cabinet members. So you will see that in the current constitution, 9.3.2, the term of office of the leader will be appointed on an annual basis at the annual meeting of the council until such a time, and you'll see there that there is provision in clause D for the removal of the council leader by a resolution of the council. There is no such clause D with regards to the election or the removal of said deputy leader in 9.4 or other cabinet members in 9.5, and yet this provision does, from what I've seen in other constitutions, not least in Cardiff Council's constitution, that clause does exist. Might you explain this oversight or this anomaly, and whether we might want to close this anomaly in our own constitution?
Yes, of course. I wouldn't describe it as an oversight. So this constitution has been adopted previously. I can't speak for previous monitoring officers, but if this is something that members would like included in the constitution, that's certainly something that we could propose, and I'll take that forward with consultation with group leaders and members, and it can be discussed at council if that is something that the Democratic Services Committee supports and would like me to do.
Well, I mean, I can't speak for my fellow committee members, but I think it certainly warrants at least some further thinking and some further investigation by officers. If I may just briefly, Chair, because I've detained the monitoring officer long enough, make two final remarks. Section 34.2.6 on the Welsh Language Act, should that be updated to be the Welsh Language Measure? My understanding was that the Welsh Language Measure now superseded the Welsh Language Act. Are these key provisions on the Welsh language somewhat outdated and in need of a refresh?
Good point, absolutely. Yes, thank you.
And I did have a final comment. It pertained to the allocation of seats to political groups. Now, I'm not sure whether this necessarily falls neatly into your own work as part of this broader review of the Constitution, but my understanding is that we approve the political balance of committees annually at the annual general meeting. Is that the case? And is there no such opportunity or window to review that political balance until the next AGM?
That's right. So the requirement in the legislation is to revert at the AGM. So that's set out in the. I don't have the legislation to hand, but it is certainly the case. Yeah.
So what if, I mean, indulge me in a hypothetical, if there were a string of by-elections which flipped individual seats for whatever reason, let's say, resignations from this authority, midway through the calendar year, and control of the authority would default from one political party to another. Are we really saying that the majority, the new majority run authority, would find themselves in the minority in all select committees? Is that what you're saying? There is no redress?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm not saying it. That is what the legislation says. And the only reason I know, actually, is I looked into it recently when there was the by-election in Usk, and that John asked me to have a look into that particular issue, and I researched it. It was quite clear that the requirement is annually at the AGM. No requirement to do that earlier.
But is that so? Because I was reviewing Part 4 of the legislation, the political, the Local Government Committees and Political Groups Regulation of 1990. Is that the most current legislation, or has that been amended since then?
I'm sorry, Councillor Thomas. I'll probably have to pick this up with you outside of this meeting because I don't.
Do you mind? Because I mean,
yeah, I think absolutely.
It's a hypothetical, but I mean, it seems absurd. We're control of this council to flip midway through, and I appreciate, this is a hypothetical, but were it to do so and to have one party in the majority and yet represented in the minority on all scrutiny committees, it doesn't seem to sit comfortably. Whether we might somehow address this through our own standing orders or whether there's some other creative means of address this, but happy to take this one offline. Of course, yeah. Bend your ear on it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's certainly a legislative requirement, but I would be wrong of me to kind of answer a pop quiz, I think, on legislation I don't have in front of me. So I think if I do that, I can pick up with you individually afterwards. That's okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. In line with your question that you asked about the removal of the deputy leader and executive posts, would we like to vote on that one? We've got a voting facility, so we know then if it's the view of the meeting rather than necessarily the view of a member of the meeting. So.
I would feed it back anyway as part of the consultation process.
Okay.
So
do we need to vote? We've got the voting facility. Okay, right. Thank you. Thank you, John, for putting that there for no reason. Right. Councillor Wright. And Councillor Keir afterwards. Okay.
Just reflecting on something raised by Councillor Buckler in terms of streamlining or simplifying the process to kind of maximise public engagement, and I noticed something that certainly residents in my ward have come a cropper with a couple of times, is not submitting a question in writing kind of X number of days before a committee or before a meeting. And I wonder whether, is there a way in which we could reduce or even remove the need for the public to give this written notice of questions? I don't know whether that would cause problems or not, but it would, I think, make it much easier for people who are not as tapped into council processes, local government processes, and kind of why should they be? Do we reasonably expect people to go and read the constitution of a council? It's just not what most people are going to do, and I wouldn't expect my residents necessarily to go and do it because they've for reasonable reasons. So is there anything, could we consider that? Could we consider making it something that people can more spontaneously do or last minute do if they want to engage with a meeting, but it just hasn't come to their attention sufficiently far in advance? Because I think a lot of times people just go, oh, that meeting's tomorrow, I wanted to ask about this, and they just didn't get a chance.
It's entirely up to members to agree the standing orders. So if that's something you'd like me to take forward, I can certainly propose that and discuss it with group leaders as part of the consultation process.
If I just come in there, we did discuss it as a committee just a couple of years ago, I think, because the deadline for public to submit questions was before we published the agenda, which made no sense because they'd have to put a question in before they knew what we were going to debate. So we had a conversation around that, changed it to 3 days, and it came up at the last point of the meeting, that council meeting, that there wasn't anything on the agenda itself that says about speaking at council. So if you go back and look at the sort of front sheets for January's council meeting now, there's a specific section in there about public speaking at full council that is just included with the agenda. So once we've published it, if someone wants to say something, there's a specific paragraph and that'll be carried on through all of them as well. So the deadline's still there, obviously, to allow us to prepare sufficient responses. And, you know, if we get one 10 minutes beforehand, we're not going to be able to answer it appropriately. So a deadline is a good thing to have in there. Whether it's the right deadline, we'll leave up to you. But we've tried to act on that and make it a bit clearer as well.
Okay, Councillor Wright? Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Keir.
Thanks very much, Chair. I just wanted to go back to 2717(2), if I may, to try to understand. Understand how you've got there. I'm trying to understand now the practicalities of this potential amendment in a meeting. So if an amendment is put forward and the proposer of the motion accepts it, is that going to disallow any further amendments? And if not, is it only the amendment to the motion that can be amended then? So
If, for example, you moved a motion, then Councillor Davis proposed an amendment that you were happy with and you agreed with, you could agree to accept his amendment. Yeah. Then it would continue as normal. So you would debate the amended motion as if it would then be the substantive motion. You would be up, for example, for Councillor Strong to propose a separate motion, but that would need to be voted on. It couldn't just be agreed by you. It would need to be voted on. So only the first amendment could be subject to the agreement of the original proposer.
So any subsequent amendment could still refer to the original motion, or would it only apply to the amended motion that was agreed by the proposer? So your motion would then be amended by Councillor Davis, and then that would be the motion. Then it would be subject to the amendments by whoever else wanted to raise a separate motion, because that amendment would already be carried. So it would be as if there'd already been a vote and it'd been accepted. So that would be the substantive motion. Any further amendments would then be to the motion as amended. Is that potentially, though, allowing almost a shutdown of debate? Because you could make an amendment that prevents full debate or be politically motivated? The opposite. So, for example, if you were to propose a motion and then Councillor Strong proposed an amendment that you didn't agree with, and there was a debate and a vote on that amendment, which changed the motion in a way that you didn't necessarily agree with. Another councillor could come along and propose a motion that an amendment that you did agree with, and then undo the amendment that just happened. So it doesn't prevent any number of amendments to subsequently come along and be debated and voted upon. It just allows the proposer
to agree an amendment that they are happy with. If they're not happy with it, they haven't got to agree with it. It can go to a debate and a vote. So it doesn't mean that the proposer of the original motion has to accept anything. It may be that you hear an amendment, oh, actually that's sensible, and I agree with that, and I probably would put that in if I'd thought about it, and it allows you to accept that amendment without going through the necessity of potentially a debate, but certainly a vote on something that is entirely innocuous.
So it's aimed at the innocuous amendment and not a substantive amendment, because obviously we have had votes, and indeed you've been involved, James, where we've said, or councillors have said, well, actually that is a substantive change, is the whole basis of the motion.
No, it's there for an amendment that the proposer is happy with. So a proposer wouldn't accept an amendment that they felt changed the motion. And as you quite rightly say, you can't change, you can't propose an amendment that negates a motion. You can change a motion. That's what the motions are for. But what you can't do is negate the purpose of a motion or substantially rewrite it. So it's separate entirely to those rules around negation of a motion. It's there. For example, if a member A wanted to move a motion and then member B proposed an amendment that member A was entirely happy with, why then have a debate and a vote on something that member A is entirely happy with?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Buckler?
Thank you. I with Councillor Keir and Councillor Davis sort of shared the concerns about substantive motion changes during council. So it's very good to have your clarity, James, because it's an incredibly important thing. We don't, as members put forward motions lightly. It is something, we do it because we care about the motion, and it's very important. So I'm glad to hear that you've clarified that. Just and another point coming to Councillor Wright's point, I think we should look at the lead time for public contributions. I take your point, John, about that you need time to prepare, but perhaps we need to look again at the three-day rule. I think we should make it as easy as possible for members of the public to join the fray and feel that they're part of their council. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I'm assuming there aren't any more questions. Oh, sorry, Councillor Davis.
Apologies, yeah. I think the monitoring officer has responded to the concerns that I had as articulated by Councillor Keir and Councillor Buckler. I mean, I keep coming back to this proposed amendment. I mean, my only concern is that it could, and notwithstanding the reassurance provided by the monitoring officer, it could invite some gamesmanship. So again, if you indulge me in a hypothetical, if a motion had been tabled a week or so prior to full council, and if a political party anticipated the political mood music in a week's time and had seen a volume of local coverage in a certain direction, might that not invite a first mover strike or a first mover advantage to amend the motion in such a way that further amendments to said amended motion would have the impact of negating the substantive motion, thus making those amendments unacceptable to you, monitoring officer, and to the chair, which would have precisely the desired effect or the perceived impact which Councillor Keir and myself have outlined, which is to potentially curtail debate in full council. That's the only niggle I keep coming back to. Can you just further address this point about gamesmanship and potentially I don't see any impact with the immediate acceptance of the amendment. That is entirely reasonable if both parties are agreeable to it, but the impact comes down further down the chain, does it not? Where any further amendments would have the impact of negating the substantive motion, which would then, would it not, make it harder for members to table amendments?
Perhaps I can offer some reassurance. So it's the proposer of the original motion would need to accept the amendment in the first place. So if they weren't happy to accept it, then they wouldn't need to accept it, and it would go to a debate and a vote, or just straight to a vote if there was no debate. Any subsequent amendments would still need to not negate the substantive motion. Also, the original proposal, if it's accepted, that also can't negate the substantive motion. So what you can't do is propose a motion and then somebody else propose a motion that negates it, regardless whether it's accepted or not. So at no point in the chain of motions can the substantive motion be negated, if that makes sense. So it's not possible to negate a motion. This is why I've put it in there, because before, what could be done is it could undo the previous motion by agreement if you allowed subsequent movers of motions to get it by agreement, if that makes sense. So what this does is protect the integrity of the substantive motion. It can only be agreed by the original proposer, nobody else. If they don't agree to it, it goes to debate and a vote. Any subsequent motions have to go to a vote and possibly a debate beforehand if there is a debate to be had. But neither of those motions, or none of those motions, can negate the substantive motion.
Okay, Councillor Strong.
I think Councillor Davis is cleverer than I am. I rather lost him halfway through there, so I do apologise. But as I understand it, what we're talking about, I mean, you call it innocuous amendments, I think we're talking about what might be regarded as friendly amendments. Yeah.
Sorry, could I just clarify? I said innocuous as an example. Yeah, it might not be innocuous. It might nevertheless be agreeable.
So that's really the mover to accept if he wishes, if he regards it as a, or she regards it as a friendly amendment. But if it is accepted, it becomes part of the substantive motion, and that any part of the substantive motion can then be amended. Or an amendment be put forward and it can be debated. So I don't really see that it would curtail debate. It might mean that the potential amenders need to be a bit more fleet of foot, because the structure of the original might change a bit, and where words are missed in or missed out or put in might need to change a bit. Or it might even be that if an amendment is regarded as friendly but strengthens that amendment from one point of view, that might push it over the edge from somebody who would have accepted the original but regards the amended one as being a bit too strong. But that would still be free for them to amend that and for a debate to be taken and a vote taken on it. So I don't really see, from what I've understood so far, and I might not have understood everything, but the proposed amendment to the Constitution would significantly curtail any debate. I think it just streamlines things.
Okay, I think we've come to the end of the debate on the Constitution. Thank you, James. Thank you. Yes, I'm just checking that there's no other hands on screen or in the chamber. Right. Okay, let's move on then to item 4 on the agenda, which is the Independent Remuneration Panel for Wales Draft Annual Report. John.
Thank you, Chair. You'll have all received this by email. I think it was around October time I sent it out. Because we didn't have meetings towards the end of last year, we would normally just receive this, which is the Remuneration Panel's draft report, which sets out the remuneration levels for councillors for next year from the 1st of April. The process is they'll normally publish their draft report around October time, open it for consultation with a view to publishing a final report around February, ready for implementation in April. You'll have received it by email, like I say, as we didn't have a meeting, so this is just to close the loop and bring it back to us here to receive it formally. The main headlines are that there'll be an uplift in the basic salary for members. There's some discussions among local authorities around how co-opted members are paid, but we dealt with that at our meeting in April 24 and agreed how we were going to carry that forward. And then also with the introduction of the corporate joint committees, there'll be corporate co-opted members appointed to that, and that deals with how they are paid. So not a massive amount of change compared to the previous years. It's just for us to note it here. Once we receive the final report, I'll again bring it back to a future meeting so we've got it. But unless there's any questions, it's really just for noting, making sure we've received it and closing the loop on that one.
Any comments from any members? Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I just wondered on the community council thing, it said somewhere in the report that the community councillors must be paid a certain amount, but there wasn't really, when it was originally brought in, there wasn't really clarity over whether this amount was just expenses or whether it was something that had to be taxed as an allowance by people if they needed to be taxed, and I just wondered if that's being clarified.
I'm not entirely sure. I'm not that familiar with the community and town council elements of it, because I leave that up to the community and town councils to process themselves. There's quite a distinction, I think, in the differences that they can get, because if they're in a particular role such as the mayor, then that can contribute a more significant allowance than the £150 a year that community and town councillors are entitled to for covering expenses like letters and any admin costs there. I don't know if they are taxable, and I wouldn't put my neck on the line to do with anything to do with HMRC, because we never know what the outcome is going to be when they're dealing with it. So I haven't got an answer, but I can try and find out for you after the meeting.
Yeah, because I think it says, basically, I've just found it now, it says mandatory payments determination 7, payment for extra costs of working from home. All councils must pay their members £156 a year, equivalent to £3 a week, towards the extra household expenses, including heating, lighting, power and broadband of working from home. And then it says councils must either pay their members £52 a year for the cost of office consumables required to carry out their role, or alternatively councils must enable members to claim full disbursement for the cost of their office consumables. So it sounds a bit like expenses, but whether it's regarded by HMRC as expenses, I don't know, because obviously it would save the community councils quite a bit of bother if it was just regarded as expenses.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. And the next paragraph there says it's up to each individual community council to have its own policy as well. So we could be having that 30 different interpretations of it. So I couldn't give you a definitive answer at the minute. Sorry.
Any other comment? Councillor Buckler?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to sort of note, really, that I think it's very important that we have an independent panel on remuneration, and I think it sort of ensures that it's fair and shields the decisions from political influence. So hopefully enhancing public trust in that. But I do wonder whether, you know, we could sort of think of or sort of recommend to the independent panel that we should have sort of more external oversight from, say, you know, citizen panels or academics to sort of enhance that independence of thought. Because I know it is, you know, people often think that, oh, well, why are they being paid that? But if it's has much more clarity for people, and they know that it's completely and utterly independent as it is, it's very important that we carry on. Anyway, it was just my observation. But thank you, John, for bringing that to us again. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
So have we received the final report? Sorry. Have we received the final report yet, or are we still on draft?
No, at this stage it's still the draft. The final report should be out towards the end of February.
Will we have to meet to approve that as a committee, or will that go straight to council?
No, because there's no decision really for the committee or council to make in terms of how the report is interpreted and how we make payments to members. There's no decision to make on it, so it doesn't go anywhere. That's why we bring it here now, just to note it, receive it, we've got it audited, we've had it. We used to be able to make determinations on certain bandings for chairs, and that was a function for council, so it would have gone there originally. But now it's up to individual members to know whether to tell us whether they want to receive certain aspects of that remuneration or not. It's not a decision of a council, it's not a decision of a committee, so it's just bringing it back to note.
Okay. Thank you. If there's no other question or comment, we move on to the next item, which is item 5, the council diary for 2025 to 2026. Thank you, John.
Yeah, hopefully a fairly quick one again. Annual report that keeps coming back to us. Make sure I haven't done anything wrong, particularly in setting the diary for next year, that I haven't missed anything or made any errors before it obviously goes to council, because it is a council function to approve the council diary. As ever, we try to avoid school holidays, bank holidays, and all those periods of having any meetings. It does make the calendar quite congested sometimes, but we followed members' wishes in doing that, and it's really just here. If I've made any clear errors, please let me know, and we'll look to get those through amended before it goes back to full council. It's also gone to group leaders, scrutiny chairs, the scrutiny manager as well. So plenty of options to have a look at it, but any errors, please just let me know.
Okay. Any comments? Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think one of the comments I was going to make was obviously, people who are on the planning committee. There is a provisional date of the 5th of August, and obviously, if you're not on the planning committee but you're a ward member, on occasions you do actually go to the planning committee, and you wouldn't necessarily. You might be taking annual leave then because you don't think you've got any meetings, but then 1 week before you find out there is a meeting. So I think, there needs to be some recognition of flexibility there, really, in terms of when reports are brought to the planning committee. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll have a chat with planning and see if there's something we can do to bring the reports forward. I mean, it's a difficult one because the service still needs to run through August, even though members, want that recess during the school holidays. So we still have to put the committee meeting in August. For other later meetings in the year for planning, we've tried to adjust the dates and move away from perhaps the first Tuesday in the month. So if you look at like January 2026, rather than having it on the 6th of January where it normally would be, site visits would be on the Monday the 5th. We've looked to move that on a week to give that flexibility, but it's more the time of year with August that as much as members don't want the meetings during that school holiday period, there's still a need for that service to have the meetings going ahead to make the decisions on any applications that they've got coming up at that time.
Okay, thank you. Over to you again, John, for item 6, the full council meeting, views on start time.
Yeah, we've already considered it this term. There's a requirement for us to consider the start time of full council meetings at least once during the term of council. We did that. We initially said we'd delay it for 6 months or 12 months was my recollection following the elections in 2022. The determinations that we made at that time were full council would remain at 2 p.m. and we would leave all other committees to decide their own start times, days and patterns depending on the membership of each committee that suited those members who were actually needed to attend rather than sort of dictate to them what it is. I think that works, and I think that we're not going to be looking back at that option. It works well for the committees. The diary that we've just looked at there reflects each committee's own requests for dates and times for particular meetings. So it's really just an open question to members on, are we all still happy with the 2 o'clock start time for full council? Is there something that committee wants me to do, to go and check with all members whether 2 o'clock's the right start time for full council meetings? And is there any appetite to change it from anybody, I guess? So.
Okay.
We've had a run of full council meetings which have gone on really quite late, and I think people get very tired, and I think it might be worth a look at starting earlier. But that I'm more than aware of the different needs and circumstances of members. So it's one of those things where keeping all the people happy all the time is unlikely. But nonetheless, and as chair, looking out at the chamber over the year, the people, especially during the winter months, when it's, we get more tired in the evening, I think, but people look exhausted. I think the quality of debate and discussion towards the end of those meetings tails off, concentration levels tail off, and then it's a very late evening. So it would suit me very well to start at, I don't know, 11:30 and have a lunch break and come back and be done by 5. That might be awful for the majority. It really depends, but I think it would be worth a look at, because those long, late meetings are very draining for everybody.
Any other comments? Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I think, I mean, personally, it wouldn't matter to me whether it was starting earlier or starting at 2, but I do think that starting at 2 is in a sense, it's a compromise for those who do have other occupations, and it means that they don't necessarily have to take the whole day off work. So I think it has been 2 for a significant period of time, and I think that's probably one of the main reasons for it, to help those who have other occupations apart from being a county councillor, the opportunity to not necessarily have to take a whole day's leave and possibly be able to take half a day's leave or manage to work it within sort of their flexi time, so that they are available in the morning of that day if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Strong?
Yeah, thanks. I was just really going to make the same point, but just take it from there. We really do have an impossible situation. We want a more diverse council, in particular bringing in more people of working age who are employed. And how you do that, I for the life of me don't see. So we're very much a cleft stick here. But I would tend to agree with Councillor Brown that at least by keeping it at 2 o'clock, we can at least limit the impact on those of working age who need to get permission from their employers to attend.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Buckler?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor McConnell has sort of hit it on the head, really. You can't please everyone all the time. I think 2 o'clock is a good, reasonable compromise. And I think that, once a month, it slips a bit, doesn't it, when other things are happening. But once a month to have a meeting that may go on late because there are important things to discuss, I think it's a fair quid pro quo as a councillor for the residents. So I think I'm in favour of keeping it as it is.
Thank you. Councillor Wright?
I kind of sympathise with both sides. I wonder whether there's a compromise where we could bring it forward even just to 1 o'clock, because you're not losing, you're only having to take half day off work if you start that tiny bit earlier. But equally, when you have then got to get up and go to a full day's work following council, it would be nice not to finish so late and have a little bit of evening where you can wind down, or in the case for some councillors, see their children, put their kids to bed. And I just give you a slightly better work-life balance when you're fitting full council into a working week already and balancing, your personal life, your family life. Just that tiny shift forward could help, I think.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Keir?
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, this is interesting because I do recall after year 1 when we first debated this, there was talk of actually moving meetings to 5 o'clock. And I think I raised at the time then about potential quality of debate, where if we were dragging on 6 hours, etc., that would get us to 11 o'clock, etc. how long meetings go ultimately is down to the chair and how those are. And I say that's no criticism of our previous chairs, because they've all done very well in a difficult job. I'm not sure it's something I would like to do, but on a personal basis, being full-time employed, 2 o'clock works for me. And also I do voluntary work on a Thursday for an hour and a half then. So on a personal basis, it wouldn't work. But then with my other hat on, which is chair of the Conservative group, something that we have discussed, and the overall view was that it should stay at 2 o'clock. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Any other perceptions? Change of times? Stay as we are?
I'm gathering from the mix of responses, again, I think like Councillor Strong said, it's an impossible job. We're not going to please everybody there. Is it worth me surveying members again? But I think, if I'm going to do a survey, it needs to be specific, with maybe one option of moving it an hour earlier, potentially, given that we've not got an appetite for 10 o'clock starts on the majority. But again, I'm happy to be guided by you, but the longer term thinking from me here is, even if we do something, we're going to get to council and we're going to go back around again of, it doesn't suit me, it suits me, it doesn't suit me, and we end up with a status quo anyway when we've opened up a can of worms potentially.
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, I think you had a survey about it before, and I think you're just repeating the same thing myself.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. I think on that basis, perhaps we just leave it at 2 o'clock for now, and if members are getting grumblings, they come to the chair, and we can reopen the debate up at another point if we need to.
Okay, everybody reasonably happy? Settle for that. Okay, thank you. And we'll move on to item 7, discussion and voting at meetings. Councillor Keir, this was an issue that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Again, it's something I just want to put out there on the table, just some concerns I had. Obviously, as councillors, the Nolan principles concerning standards in public life and what the public expect for us are paramount. And obviously, I don't need to remind members about those 7 principles, but accountability, where we are accountable to the public for our decisions and actions, and we must, it says, submit ourselves to the necessary scrutiny to ensure that. My observation since being elected in May 22, and we accept that we're in a finely balanced council, is that how members vote is key, and hence why we've often used the recorded vote system, and thus those are noted in the minutes. I strongly believe that the public should be able to openly and easily see, such as by way of an electronic search, on how members vote for, against, or abstain on issues, that particularly where they are affecting the constituency. As an example, a search on my voting record shows nothing. It's almost as if I haven't voted on anything. And I know post-council meetings, I'm often asked who's voted in what particular way. Now, I'm led to believe from my inquiries that this current system has come about as a result of maybe COVID and hybrid meetings. But I ask, in the interests of openness and accountability, is there not an electronic way of recording not just the numbers of who voted which way, but also the name? So that's question 1, point 1. And the second point, I've been concerned that with electronic voting results, they've been declared when not all members have voted. So potentially, surely votes that are recorded electronically in a meeting should match the number of people who are attending the meeting. And what do I mean by that? So if the vote was was clearly unanimous by getting well past the 50% level. If there was to be a system of electronic recording of who voted where or not at all, how a member voted wouldn't be recorded if it was declared before all the buttons had been pressed, as it were. And indeed, members may be keen to have their vote known, and dare I say it, some may not. Personally, I struggle to see why any member would oppose such voting openness, so that all their electorate can see it, and so that they're being accountable. But I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about how this system has come about and what members' views are on this committee about this issue, for me, of openness and accountability of how we vote. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Keir.
Shall I come in, Chair?
Yeah, thank you.
I think it might be helpful if I set out the answer to Councillor Keir's initial point of how did we get to here. So if we go back pre-COVID, there were no remote attendance, no hybrid meetings, nobody attending online. The only way you could come to a meeting is by sitting in the room, raising your hand for how you want to vote. We'd scan the room, count them up, and we'd say it was passed or didn't pass, etc. When COVID hit, we looked to put in systems that, one, could be long-term, so that we could move into a hybrid meeting with consistency rather than having lots of staggered changes, but also reflected the procedures that we had in place if we were in an in-person meeting. So the way we do it now currently is how we did it through COVID as well, in that members express their voting preference in the chat. The numbers will come in, it'll tell us how many votes have come in and the numbers for each preference. And if it's clear that the number of votes that might be outstanding aren't going to change that result, then we can carry on and we can move that. And that's how we've done it. That was how it was done with hands, and that's how we sort of implemented it with the online voting. Not all councils did it the same. Some initially started off with roll calls on every vote and quickly rode back from it because it was adding over an hour, hour and a half to every agenda by the time you're going through every vote. So the fail-safe that we put into our system was if the result of the vote was within 2 votes, regardless of how many votes are missing, well, you've got to take that into account as well. But if we were within 2 votes, then we would revert to that roll call because we couldn't be confident, or have pure confidence then is more the thing I'd say, that everything we've had in is perfect and we can rely just on that vote. So we'll trigger that, we'll go to the recorded vote, that goes out on the live stream with the audio of everybody's voting preference, as well as us now putting it in the minutes as well. So that's how we've got to where we are today. Across Wales, there's still a mix. Some will still do roll calls on every item, and I if I'm honest, I wouldn't suggest we do that because of the time it takes to go through it all, particularly where in the majority of cases we're getting clear results. One question I think I would have for Councillor Keir is, are we looking at just full council meetings that we'd be looking to do this, or are we looking at across the piece and going to scrutiny committees, planning committees, and all committee voting as well? That'd be one question I'd be interested in, because how we go about doing this could be quite time consuming for me and members of my team. We can record now using the functionality that we've got who has voted and how and the method they voted, but the constraints within the system is the real-time element of that. So to do that, we've got to go into the back end, export that data. It'll then give us a spreadsheet to tell us who's voted in the way they did, but it won't tell us who hasn't voted, which is the bit we're interested in, to go and then target on that councillor and help them. It's just not an easy process. Having said that, one thing I'm exploring at the minute is potentially some new software to host our meetings. it wasn't available when COVID came about. It wasn't available when we refurbished the council chamber. It's fairly new. But if you'd like to go and have a look perhaps at the Vale of Glamorgan's, some of their online meetings, the software that they've brought in allows us to integrate a remote meeting platform with the microphones in the chamber. So essentially, if you were sat in here, you'd have a card, you'd pop it in your microphone, it knows you're sat there. It knows that when you press the button, that's your vote. And when you're on the live stream, it'll pop up and say, Councillor so-and-so, however we want to do that, their ward. We can link it back to our software and it'll tell you what the agenda item is on the live stream, bookmark it, tidy it all up. Makes that end user experience a lot cleaner. But the important bit with that is it links the same, the people attending remotely, when they would vote on their computer at wherever they are, is exactly the same as someone voting on a microphone in the council chamber. And then it brings it all together. And that would allow us to display the results on the live stream as well, straight after it's happened. These are all really new technologies that have come out recently, and shows really that the market's still catching up with council meetings and where we are, rather than something being there and we're missing out. I think it's safe to say we led the way for quite a long time in terms of the way we live stream meetings and how quick we got remote meetings up and running. And the only reason we would look to change that is if there's something that is going to make a big difference to the way we do things now. Potentially there is, but there's still a scoping exercise for me on what that's going to cost, whether we can do it within budget, and how we go about it. If not, yes, we can still do publishing individual member votes, but it's certainly not going to be quick and isn't going to have the impact, I think, that the overnight impact that is potentially out there to do that. Does that help, Councillor Keir?
Yeah, it does. And perhaps if I could clarify a couple of points. So I was referring mainly to full council, and what I'm saying here is about, you know, visibility and accountability. I do think our constituents deserve to know how we vote. And at the moment, apart from when we do a recorded vote, and I absolutely hear what you say about the time constraints of that, hence my question, is there an electronic way of recording not just the numbers but the names? And I think you've alluded to that there is, that it can be downloaded. And I think when we, you know, that links into my second point, which is that the voting should tally up with the number of members who are in the room or online, and that's not happening at the moment. So personally, I would like to see that the voting records fully recorded. As I said, it used to be you could look online and you could see the way that people had voted, but that's not there. So members of the public who may not wish to go through YouTube videos or indeed go through minutes can quite easily see how their particular member has voted, particularly on as I said, a substantive matter, and let's, as an idea, say the RLDP in the area, who voted in which particular way. And at the moment, the system potentially can, I'll say, disguise how somebody has voted. And I know we have had some scenarios where when electronic votes have been taken, and then, as you highlight, John, that, you know, it's gone within one or two of either way, abstentions have suddenly disappeared when it's come to recording votes. And that's the sort of thing about accountability, you know, the Nolan principles, honesty, openness, etc. should apply. That's my view, and hence asking that we could bring this to an agenda item. So if the technology is there, I believe that we should, you know, if you can export it post-meeting, we should use it. And if the technology is not there, but it is potentially in the marketplace, then we should look at that as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Keir. Just one thing you flagged up there, which perhaps I didn't get across properly earlier on, was the expectation that we know how many people are in the meeting, and we know we should be getting that many number of votes in on every item. Absolutely agree with that. In order to do that safely, I would need 46 members of staff, potentially, sat with someone wherever they are remotely to make sure that they've clicked their button. Because even with some members in the room, sometimes they're not actually pressing their button correctly. And even with that system that we've got now of identifying post-vote who has voted and how they voted, I haven't got that real-time data to tell me that someone hasn't voted. And it's not going to be quick enough for us to be able to drill down to that. So we have to get over that element of we're always going to have the right number of votes, because it's on the members themselves actually to make sure that they're pressing their vote and their vote is submitted. And I worry about setting an expectation, even with another system where particularly members are attending remotely, that we can work out who has or hasn't voted. New systems should be able to do it, but under the existing system we've got, there's going to be a struggle to identify that quickly.
But isn't my point is that we're here to democratically vote, and if people aren't voting, or they are because of the system not able to vote, and that's a flaw, and we should identify that and we should deal with it.
Don't disagree with you on that element. What I am saying is the facility is there for members to vote, but it's still the responsibility of the member to make sure that they click that button and press submit. You know, even with the Speak Now, we still get a lot of instances where members are double clicking on things and things like that. Could it be better? Yes. Without considerable investment at the moment, no. But like I say, I'm exploring those options in the background that'll make it a lot easier for us. In the short term, a potential fix could be that we can take the votes that we have and start using that as a basis until we can look at something that technology-wise is making it easier for us to identify who hasn't cast their vote at a particular time, and go from there. I think all I was trying to damp it down, I think, was that expectation of we've got 46 people in the room and we should have 46 votes, and we always will, because even no matter what system, unless someone has pressed that button and done what is expected of the member to make sure they've cast their vote correctly, we're going to struggle to always have that number coming in.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, John.
Okay, Councillor McConnell first. I know that Councillor Davis is there, but I did acknowledge Councillor McConnell's
Thank you.
wish to speak first.
Thank you. So as I'm understanding it, previously, so pre the system we use at the moment, we didn't have the facility we didn't record which councillors had voted which way. So we're talking about an improvement on the system, not something which is used to be provided, which isn't now. The abstentions aren't an option in the voting system. So if a councillor chooses to abstain, they've got no way of registering that as a vote, if you like. You can. Oh, I'll stand corrected. The other thing is, I'm understanding that systems are available where this could be the case, and I know in previous conversations with you a bit about that, and that is definitely worth exploring, but the implication is quite a significant investment financially, so it's not something we should express a strong opinion for or against. I'm hearing the strong arguments from Councillor Keir, but we do need to consider the costs as well. So I think it would be worth exploring. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. Very briefly, I mean, I agree with what Councillor Keir has been saying about the need to be transparent about our deliberations and actions as councillors. So in addition to a more thorough and up-to-date voting record, I mean, is it, John, within our gift to also, as part of the profile that each councillor has on the MCC website, to also populate that with, as we do with attendance records, for example, to populate any questions that have been tabled by said councillor, any motions that have been proposed or seconded by said councillor as well, because as I say, I think we owe it to the Monmouthshire public to be as transparent and as accountable and open to scrutiny in our deliberations as councillors. And as I say, the attendance profiles, go to some considerable granularity about total number of meetings expected for councillor attendance, present as expected, percentage of apologies received. Is it such a huge leap of imagination to add another layer then to that with a thorough voting tabulation, as well as I say, a record of any PQs or any motions that we as councillors have proposed or seconded? I throw that out there for perhaps further discussion offline. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to take that one away. Not entirely sure we can drill it down to individual member pages, but I know some councils will publish, say, a committee and then try and assign it to people, so there's a way of linking it back somehow. I'm sure there's something that we could do. I'll go and explore and perhaps feedback at a future meeting.
Thank you, John. Councillor Strong.
Thanks, Chair. From what I'm gathering, I mean, the points that have been made are perfectly fair. It's a question of whether we can implement them or how far we can implement them with our existing technology without excessive use of officer time. In that connection, I suggest we defer anything other than simple changes to the time when we've had a look at new technology and see if that will make that easier. In the meantime, we've got this problem of the missing voters at full council meetings. Perhaps again, there's a bit of a job for the chair there. First of all, to ask, physically, is there anybody who feels they haven't voted? It's quite possible, for example, you can be scrolling up and down the screen, finding where was the place you had to vote. Secondly, to remind them that they might have thought they voted, but have they pressed submit? To get them to do that, because I think that happens sometimes. And thirdly, to remind them that they have to actively abstain by pressing the abstain button. And I think once you've done all of that, if you have missing voters, it's perfectly acceptable to regard any missing votes as abstentions. If they've not been able to follow those basic instructions, I think there's little else you can do. We do what we can to minimise the missing voters, but where they're there, they have to be recorded as abstentions.
Can I offer perhaps a middle ground, just while we're exploring the potential for new software to maybe come in? Is it to just populate the website and show what it would look like for members where we've had a recorded vote at a full council meeting, as we're only talking about full council at this stage? We populate that manually into our software for the time being to show what it would look like, so that members can have a look at what it would look like to see how beneficial the time that we might need to spend on it if we go with it without the technology would look like, and whether that's something we want to go down. It might help just as in the interim, while we haven't got a definitive answer to move on from today. If we're recorded votes at full council anyway, I'll get those manually put into the system so they carry over to the website. We can see what it looks like, and then perhaps have another debate at it at the next meeting, by which point I might have some solid figures and potentials for new software that might solve this fairly easily. We could be having a big debate, I think, at the minute, and if we brought in the right software that would allow us to do it, then we could have easy systems that will allow it be a yes or no, do we want to do it, rather than a how do we do it.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I think one of my concerns about the voting record is that obviously the minutes have changed, and quite often it's just a recording for or against somebody's particular name, but there isn't necessarily one sentence to describe to the public, instead of spending hours of their time listening to a recording, the reasons why people voted in a particular way, because quite often, say, for example, if there has been a motion and then it's been changed and a person agreed with the original motion, but they don't agree with the change motion, even though on the change motion they may support some of the ideas in principle, but it may alter what the original motion was. There isn't any facility in the minutes to simply describe why you're voting against something. Just to give an example, when the pupil referral unit came to full council and hadn't gone to scrutiny first, I voted against that on the basis of the fact that although I agreed with the need to have pupil referral units, I voted against it because of the fact that it hadn't gone to scrutiny first. So although if you just look at it on a surface vote, you'd see that I voted against that. You wouldn't necessarily, you may lead to the wrong assumption that I was against pupil referral units, which I'm definitely not. I do support them. So I think it's very important to actually, if we have all of this vote thing, to allow at least a sentence. And I did ask at full council for this simple sentence to be included, which was voted against. That isn't fair either, because it doesn't give the public any idea of what your intentions behind the way that you voted were.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think the next one was Councillor Thomas.
Thanks. Yeah, interesting debate. You know, the points that I would make from my recollection, perhaps John or the chair can correct me, but I came in 2017. Yes, it was physical, but I don't remember, other than when a recorded vote was called for, that my vote was recorded against my name, or was that, and that certainly wasn't published anywhere. So, we didn't have that information. But if as Councillor Keir, he seems to want to move to a highly recorded sort of state. But if we're going to move to that, it's got to be highly accurate. But because if you are incorrectly set as voting against something or for something that isn't correct, then that could affect your re-election. So whatever we move to, it's not something that we can just do now on the back of a fag packet this afternoon. It's got to be looked at. And at the end of the day, if you have good contact, as I'm sure most people have with their ward, people know what you're doing and what your intentions are over big issues. And obviously, when it comes to the election in 2027, they will either vote you back or they won't vote you back. So I would have some concern about a highly, it'd be almost like voting bingo every time for people to check, well, how did Tudor vote? How did David Jones vote, etc. So I think we have to be careful, and it has to be very carefully looked into. It has to be highly accurate. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. I think next was Councillor Keogh. Did you want to come back at
I just
this
wanted
stage?
to come back. Firstly, Councillor Thomas, my last comment, one of my opening remarks was I'd be interested to hear members' views. So I absolutely wasn't suggesting for 1 minute that this meeting today should come up with an agreed package of measures that we should agree to or make recommendations for. And I think John has made some valid points that possibly we wouldn't have been aware of in terms of technology that is out there. And I certainly also wouldn't be wanting to move to recorded votes at this stage on everything that we do. But I do disagree with Councillor Thomas. I think it is important that members of the public are aware how we vote on things. But I also do agree with him that accuracy is important as well. And I think what I've been saying is that we have had scenarios where electronic voting, and then we've had recorded voting as a result of a tightness of a thing where the votes have changed. So even now we might have inaccuracy with the electronic voting system, but I'm also adamant that I think everybody should vote. It's as simple as that, and that the chair should not be declaring, oh well, excuse me, that's unanimous because we've got to 30 out of 46 in that regard. So I absolutely get that there is more work to be done. And the final point was, I do recall when I looking at my county council profile, etc., it did say in at least the first year, where votes had been undertaken and where I had voted. So I don't know whether that was something that's been subsequently withdrawn, but there were definitely records of how I voted certainly in my first year as a councillor. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Keir. Councillor Howells.
Thanks, Chair. John, I was just going to really ask, what about other local authorities? What are they doing specifically in Wales? Are they using recorded systems in their technology?
Some are, yeah. I think it's a mixed bag across Wales. Like I say, some still don't use any technology, just do verbal votes. Some have started using technology to do it, like say the Vale of Glamorgan and Cardiff are using the one particular software package we're potentially looking at. And it's not just part of that package that we're voting comes in, it's other ones as well. You know, what it does mean is we'd have to move away from Teams to a different platform. So there's a training element for members in what that new platform is and how it operates. But that's for me to worry about at a later time if it is something we want to come in. But ultimately, there's a big mixed bag across Wales in how everyone's doing it, to be honest. And there's also different constitutional requirements. Some constitutions will say we'll record every member's vote. Some will just say we'll take a vote on a unanimous basis, which is what ours is, and the way we have interpreted it into using the technology. I think to change it, and we've got the right person next to us, we would need a constitutional change if we were going to record every vote.
It would depend on the changes were being proposed, but at the moment we've got, I think 9 members need to vote for it to be recorded in the minutes. That's a separate issue to be recorded on the website. So it's entirely different. So it depends on what proposals are coming forward, and I'll be able to advise them whether we need constitutional changes to reflect that.
Yeah, we'd almost be getting rid of the recorded vote requirement because we'd be doing it by default then rather than needing that process in the background. So again, I think coming back to what can I do? As we're publishing the recorded votes within the minutes already, we don't need any constitutional changes to make those recorded votes available on the website. So if I start to look at populating those as we go forward, it can give everybody a clear picture of what that would look like and gives me that little bit of time to go and explore the software options that will give us a definitive position on we can do X, Y, and Z against not having it, and we can do X. Something like that, I think, is probably the best outcome I can give you today, to be honest. But
the only thing I would add is we can't compel a member to vote. If a member doesn't want to vote, they don't have to. So there's no requirement. So, for example, if there's 46 people in a room, not every member needs to vote. So maybe they choose not to, and not necessarily an abstention either. They just may not vote.
Right, sorry. Did you want to speak, Councillor Wright? Thought you did. Right. Here we are. Floor's yours.
Thank you. I'll be brief. It's mostly been covered. The only thing I would add is that I kind of sympathise with you, Councillor Brown, in terms of why you would want your reason for a particular vote recorded, but I'm not convinced that, you know, I didn't support it at the time, because I'm not convinced that that's an effective use of council and officer time, and also I'm not sure that you can always summarise your reason in one sentence or two. I would argue, I think, that actually the personal responsibility that we have to our residents to explain the way we voted is more effectively done as a direct communication between us and our residents. Somebody who I represent wants to know why I voted a certain way, I can explain that in as much detail as they want directly with them, rather than it needing to be part of council minutes. I think that's a perfectly adequate system that puts the onus on us to do the work, which I think is right and proper.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, I think that people might not necessarily want to raise directly with you about the way that you voted, but they may want to simply look on the council agenda and, you know, see what the minutes say, and not necessarily spend an hour or two listening to a recording, and you know, in that particular case, there was a very specific reason why you were voting in a certain direction, and the way that the councillors were voting on that particular issue. So to not have, I mean, we had much more extensive minutes previously. They have been curtailed now in terms of this is the link to the debate, relying on technology alone. And there are occasions when I've seen meetings which have missed part of recordings, so you can't actually go on them. I can't remember when it was, but I know that there was an instance in this last year that happened. I can't recall which committee it was, but I can remember it being drawn to my attention. So I think whilst curtailing minutes and making them as brief as possible is the way that we've gone, I think we've gone too far that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Buckler.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's incredibly important that our residents know how we vote on things. You know, quite often the vote's very close, and by the sort of flick of a vote, it can, which may well have been lobbied for by various factions. It changes everything. It sort of and I think our residents have a right to know, you know, how we responsibly vote. They voted us in to represent them, and I think it's incredibly important that we have clarity. I certainly, you know, feel that it's our sort of obligation that it's completely obvious how we're voting as we do council meetings. So I don't quite see why there would be a need not to think it was a good idea, I have to say. I'm all for showing everyone how we vote. Thanks.
Can we conclude then by asking John to do some research as to what's available and agenda this for the next as an item at the next agenda as well?
Yeah.
For the next meeting?
Yeah, I think, like I say, if any recorded votes we have now, we will put onto the website, and I'll go back through December's meeting and do that as well. So I think it'll just give us a better starting position for any future meeting where we come to review it. And like I say, I'm already under review with different options that are available to us that aren't just for voting, but it will have implications for the discussions we've had here. So it may be better to, we've got members' intention, I think, which is we're not against having votes recorded for full council for every member. It might just be how we do it, how much it's going to cost, and how easily we can do that, and what other benefits can we get out of the system in terms of identifying who hasn't voted to make sure we make sure all members are voting where they want to.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Councillor Keir. As you're the person that brought up the issue, are you happy with that resolution? Okay, thank you. I think that brings us to the last item, which is to note the date of the next meeting being the 7th of April. So if there's no other business, we'll thank you all for your attendance, safe journey home, and see you in April and before. Thank you.
Thank you all.